I used to think silence in a home meant peace, until one day I sat down on my daughter-in-law's new leather sofa, and she smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, maybe not that seat. It doesn't match your vibe." That same evening, her mother arrived, was handed a wine glass, and gracefully sank into the same $5,000 sofa like a queen on her throne. I didn't say a word, but at 3 a.m., I printed a copy of the house deed, placed it under the armrest, and walked out, leaving behind the home I helped pay for and the silence they thought meant obedience. My name is Margaret, and at 59, I had grown used to the quiet hum of my modest one-bedroom apartment. The kind of quiet that clings to the walls after a lifetime of noise has slowly faded. My husband Tom passed away 17 years ago. Heart attack, sudden, brutal. He was the kind of man who never missed a Sunday breakfast or a little league game. His absence echoed louder than any sound could. After Tom, it was just me and Daniel. Daniel was my everything. He came into the world breech, stubborn even then, and that never really changed. He was the kind of boy who asked why more than or how, who once spent an entire afternoon dismantling the family toaster to understand how heat worked. I still remember the smell of burnt crumbs and electrical wire, and his proud grin when he put it back together, almost correctly. I worked 2 jobs when he was in school, cashier by day, baker by night. I missed parent-teacher meetings sometimes, but I never missed his birthdays. I never forgot the way his eyes lit up when I showed up in my flour-dusted apron, holding a cake I'd made in the bakery after closing time. By the time Daniel got his degree in architecture, he was already interviewing with firms in Chicago and Seattle. He ended up staying local, which I took as a sign from the universe that maybe, just maybe, my sacrifices had built something strong enough to hold us together. Then came Clarissa. She was everything Daniel wasn't, poised, polished, full of pristine minimalism. I first met her at a company gala where Daniel introduced me as the woman who made me who I am. Clarissa smiled, leaned in, and whispered, "You must be so proud." It sounded sincere, almost too smooth. She wore white silk and no jewelry, not even a watch. "Time shouldn't dictate a woman," she once said to me. I didn't quite understand, but I nodded anyway. They got married in a small garden ceremony that I helped pay for, even though Clarissa's parents offered. "It's the least I can do," I told Daniel, and he hugged me tighter than he had in years. I went home to my apartment afterward and found a leftover centerpiece on my doorstep, white orchids in a glass cube. No card, just the silence again. Years passed. They bought a house, a beautiful, sterile place with white walls, glass furniture, and no visible warmth. Daniel said it was Clarissa's dream space. I visited for holidays, always arriving with a pie and leaving with a quiet ache in my chest. Then, one spring afternoon, Daniel called and said, "Mom, how would you feel about moving in with us?" I blinked at the question. My rent had just increased. My knees had started hurting in the mornings. The bakery where I picked up weekend shifts had closed. "Are you sure?" I asked, voice trembling. "Of course," he said. "We have space, and Ruby would love having you around more." Ruby, my granddaughter, the only heartbeat that made me feel instantly 10 years younger. So I packed up 40 years of living into 16 boxes and 3 suitcases. Left behind the recliner Tom used to nap in, the spice rack he built with Daniel when he was 12, the yellowed curtains I never had the heart to replace. When I arrived, Clarissa greeted me with a smile so curated it could have been printed on a lifestyle blog. "Welcome home," she said, leading me to a guest room that looked like a page from a catalog. White sheets, one minimalist painting, no closet. "We can get a rolling rack for your clothes," she added casually, but I didn't mind. Not then. Daniel carried my boxes inside, kissed my forehead, and said, "You belong here now." And for the first time in a long while, I believed it. I made my bed with the lavender quilt Tom and I picked out on our anniversary. I unpacked the photos. One of Daniel in his kindergarten graduation cap, one of Tom holding Ruby for the first time. I cooked dinner that night, chicken pot pie from scratch. Ruby sat on the counter asking why carrots were orange. Daniel hugged me in the kitchen, flour on his suit. Clarissa smiled, sipping white wine. "This smells nostalgic," she said. I took it as a compliment. Later that evening, I sat in the living room and watched the three of them laugh together on the new cream-colored sofa. I didn't join them. I didn't want to leave crumbs. Clarissa had vacuumed twice that day. Still, in that moment, I thought, this is it. This is what coming home feels like. I didn't know then that home was something I'd soon feel like a guest in. The first few weeks felt like something out of a dream, an awkward, slightly over-designed dream, but a dream nonetheless. Clarissa was unexpectedly attentive. She greeted me each morning with a faint smile and a cup of green tea. Never coffee. Too acidic, she said. The tea was lukewarm and tasted like watered grass, but I drank it anyway, grateful for the gesture. "We'll have to find you a yoga class nearby," she added once, as though a little stretching might erase years of arthritis. Ruby, on the other hand, was sunshine in motion. At 5, she had Clarissa's bone structure, but Daniel's eyes, those curious, questioning eyes that never let the world pass by unnoticed. She clung to me like ivy on a garden trellis. Every morning she asked, "Grandma, can we make pancakes?" Every night she insisted I read her one of the old fairy tales Daniel used to love. Hansel and Gretel, Rapunzel, the little match girl. Clarissa thought they were a bit grim, but Ruby liked the dark bits best. "They're real," she told me once as I tucked her in. "They feel like how people really are." We built routines. Mondays were for banana bread. Wednesdays, Clarissa worked late, so Ruby and I would walk to the park, feed ducks, and come back with muddy shoes that I wiped down before stepping on the pristine white floors. Fridays were movie nights, though I quickly learned that meant something different now. No buttery popcorn, no loud comedies, just tasteful cinema with foreign subtitles and oat milk hot chocolate. Daniel seemed relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Work's been easier with Clarissa helping me streamline things at home," he said one night as we sat on the back patio. He didn't say what was being streamlined, and I didn't ask. On my birthday, he surprised me with a wooden box of hand creams and herbal oils. "You always had dry hands from baking," he said, grinning. I held the box and blinked back tears. Clarissa handed me a silk scarf, ivory, with soft gold lines like brushstrokes. "It's from a sustainable line I love. Thought it matched your energy," she said. I didn't know what kind of energy she meant, but I nodded, thanked her, and wore it to dinner. The sushi place she picked had no forks, no soy sauce, and the chairs were barely stools. But Daniel was smiling, Ruby was drawing dragons on the paper napkin, and Clarissa was sipping sake like she belonged in a painting. It was enough. Back at home, Clarissa suggested a little family recalibration, as she called it. "Since we're all under one roof now," she explained, "maybe we can define zones, just so everyone feels balanced." She handed me a laminated floor plan. My name was penciled in next to the guest room and the downstairs bath. Clarissa and Daniel shared the master suite. Ruby's room was upstairs across from Clarissa's new home office. The kitchen was labeled as communal space, but marked with a note, "Please check with Clarissa before planning meals. Fridge rotation ongoing." It was done so neatly, I almost laughed. I folded the floor plan and tucked it into my nightstand. That evening, I baked lemon bars. Ruby licked the spoon. Daniel had 2 pieces and said, "Tastes like high school." Clarissa passed, citing her cleanse. Still, she said, "Smells like home." And I let that warm me. Weekends were a delicate dance. Sometimes Clarissa invited her parents over, and I found myself subtly relocated to the backyard or to Ruby's room with a coloring book. Other times, I was the centerpiece of the living room, holding Ruby on my lap, watching documentaries about Scandinavian furniture design. Clarissa showed me how to properly fold a throw blanket. "Texture hierarchy," she said. "It's everything." I learned to keep my voice low in the mornings, not to use the kitchen sponge for wiping counters, and to always shut the pantry door completely. Open doors collect dust, she warned, but I didn't mind, not then. There was something comforting about fitting myself into this new rhythm, about being part of something, even if the shape I was given didn't quite fit. I told myself it was enough. And when Ruby drew a picture of the house with stick figures, me in the middle, holding her hand, Clarissa smiled and said, "That's lovely, sweetheart." Then she took the drawing, clipped it to the fridge with a minimalist magnet shaped like a teardrop, and walked away. For a moment, it really did feel like home. It began with curtains. One afternoon, Clarissa came home with a roll of sheer fabric tucked under her arm and declared that the living room needed to breathe. The warm, patterned drapes I had helped Daniel pick years ago were taken down and replaced with pale silver panels that shimmered like frost. "Light should reflect, not absorb," she said, gently folding the old fabric and placing it in a donation bag without asking. Then came the rug, a soft, woven heirloom I had brought from my old apartment. It was a little faded, sure, and had a corner that curled up no matter how many times I pressed it down, but it was thick, warm, and smelled faintly of lavender. One morning, it was gone. Clarissa explained, "It disrupted the visual continuity. I hope that's okay?" I didn't argue. Instead, I adjusted the scarf she gave me on my birthday and told myself to let it go. It was just a rug. Soon the changes moved into the kitchen. She replaced the floral dish towels with monochrome linen ones. The copper kettle I used every morning disappeared, swapped with a white electric one, shaped like a capsule. The spice rack was cleared, alphabetized, then color-coded. Cinnamon and nutmeg were placed at the back with a note in her handwriting. Seasonal. She started referring to the kitchen as her creative corner. Lights were installed beneath the cabinets, soft white strips that gave off a glow at night. "It's all about tone," she said, arranging lemons in a geometric bowl. "Kitchen content performs better in soft neutrals." I didn't understand what that meant until I walked in on her one morning, filming a reel for social media. She wore a cream blouse, hair tied back with a minimalist ribbon, and held a smoothie like it was an award. I stood there holding a mixing bowl, apron dusted with flour. She paused the recording. "Oh," she said, voice tight, "could you just stay off frame for a second? I'm doing a reset morning routine thing." I nodded and backed away. Later that week, I baked banana bread while Ruby played in the corner. The smell filled the house, warm and nostalgic. When Daniel walked in, he smiled and kissed my cheek. "Smells like college." Clarissa, however, frowned slightly. "We should air the place out. The scent gets trapped in the upholstery." I looked at the new sofa, the leather one in bone white, imported from Italy. It had cost $5,000, Daniel told me, a gift for Clarissa's mother's upcoming visit. Clarissa added gently, "It's just that the kitchen and living area are open plan. You know how fabric absorbs scent, especially butter and spice. That night, I noticed the window above the stove left open, despite the chill. The next morning, a scented candle sat on the island. Linen breeze, she said, neutralizing but sophisticated. Over time, I began to time my cooking. Mornings were fine, as long as I finished before 9, when Clarissa's studio hours began. After dinner, she'd gently ask if I could avoid baking. "The oven heat competes with the ambient lighting," she said once. "It creates shadows." Yes, I found myself cooking less, eating more toast, watching Ruby grow confused. "No muffins today?" she asked. "Is it because of the new couch?" I smiled and told her no. But inside, something shifted. Even the way Clarissa spoke about space changed. She no longer said our kitchen or the house. She started using words like aesthetic zones and functional layout. She printed a cleaning schedule that labeled areas by traffic flow. The kitchen was marked content sensitive. When her mother visited, she was ushered straight to the living room and seated, delicately, reverently, on the new sofa. Clarissa brought her tea in fine bone china and whispered, "Don't worry. I've kept the smell neutral this week." I watched from the hallway, unseen. Later that night, Daniel found me folding laundry. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "I'm just adjusting," I replied. "It's a beautiful home. You've built something impressive." He smiled and squeezed my shoulder. "We couldn't have done it without you." But the words rang hollow. The next morning, I opened the cabinet where I kept my old measuring cups, the dented ones I'd used for every birthday cake Daniel ever had. They were gone. In their place, a clean white set, labeled in embossed silver font. I closed the cabinet slowly. For the first time, I wondered, not just if I belonged, but if I was quietly being uninvited. Clarissa's mother's birthday arrived on a Saturday, bright and cool. The kind of day that would have once meant folding chairs in the backyard, barbecue smoke in the air, and paper plates stacked by a cooler. But this wasn't that kind of gathering. Clarissa had hired a florist. There were ivory balloons tied with satin ribbons, canapes arranged on ceramic slabs, and a jazz quartet playing softly in the background. Even the napkins were monogrammed with a silver D for Dunleavy, her maiden name, not Daniel's. "It's more timeless," she had explained. Daniel, trying his best to juggle charm and logistics, had called me earlier that week. "Mom," he said, "we're making this a big deal for Eloise. She hasn't had a real party in years." Eloise. That was Clarissa's mother. A woman with sharp cheekbones, colder eyes, and a wardrobe that never strayed from pearl and beige. I offered to help cook. Clarissa responded gently, "Maybe just dessert, Margaret. We've catered the rest. Less stress for you." I nodded and baked a lemon tart with a shortbread crust, Ruby's favorite. When I entered the living room that afternoon holding the pie in a simple glass dish, I froze. The furniture had changed, again. Where the gray sectional once stood was now a curved, cream-colored leather sofa. It gleamed under the overhead lights, spotless and statuesque. A tag still hung discreetly under the armrest. Clarissa's voice floated from behind me. "Do you love it?" I turned. "It's Italian," she continued. "Full-grain leather, custom order. Daniel surprised us with it. Early birthday gift for my mother." I looked at Daniel, who smiled sheepishly. "It matches the space better, right?" "It's beautiful," I said, and meant it, though it felt less like a seat and more like a sculpture. Guests began to arrive, floating through the room in linen and perfume. Eloise entered last, greeted like royalty. Clarissa led her to the sofa, helped her lower into it gently, as if it were made of spun glass. "Perfect," Clarissa beamed, "like it was made for you." I stood nearby, watching. Later, after plates were cleared and laughter echoed down the hallway, Ruby tugged on my sleeve. "Come sit with me, Grandma," she said, patting the spot beside her on the new sofa. I hesitated, looked around. The room had emptied slightly. The jazz had turned to low ambient music. The light through the windows had shifted, throwing soft gold across the leather. I sat, not sank like Eloise had, not leaned like Ruby did, just perched, gently, careful not to disturb anything. Clarissa walked in. She paused. "Oh," she said, almost singing the word. "Mom, maybe not that seat. It's just, this kind of leather is super sensitive, and with all the baking oils and, well, it might not mix well. And the scent, sometimes it lingers." I blinked. Ruby looked up, confused. "But she's clean," Clarissa laughed, light and crisp. "Of course she is, sweetheart. Grandma's always clean. It's just, the sofa's new. It's more of a look piece." I stood up slowly. My knees cracked, loud in the silence. I smoothed the front of my skirt and smiled, the way women do when they're bleeding on the inside, but too well trained to show it. "No problem. I said. Ruby frowned, but I wanted to read here. Clarissa stepped in smoothly, pulling Ruby up into her lap. How about you sit with Mommy for a bit? I'll show you how to fold napkins into swans. Ruby glanced back at me. I offered a wink I didn't feel and excused myself to the kitchen. The lemon tart sat untouched on the counter. Next to it, a tray of macarons, rosewater and pistachio, sat perfectly stacked, each one bearing the bakery's gold seal. Daniel entered a few minutes later, loosened his tie. You okay? I'm fine, I said, washing the same plate twice. She didn't mean anything, he added. The sofa's just new. Of course. He hesitated. She's just trying to keep things clean. It's a design thing. Aesthetic. I'm aware. He kissed my cheek again. Thanks for baking. I nodded, eyes fixed on the dish towel in my hand. That night I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The scarf Clarissa gave me hung on the doorknob. The floor plan she once printed was still tucked in the drawer. I reached for it, unfolded it in the dark. My space. My designated box. And yet, no seat on the sofa. The next morning, Ruby ran into my room. Why didn't you read with me last night? She asked. I didn't want to wrinkle the new furniture, I said, managing a smile. She furrowed her brow. But it's just a couch. Yes, I thought. But apparently, I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a variable, a factor, a potential stain. The night after the party, I couldn't sleep. The air in my room felt too still, too measured. I lay under the lavender quilt, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling beams. Somewhere upstairs, Ruby laughed in her sleep, a sound like wind chimes behind a curtain. I closed my eyes, willing that soft echo to wrap around me, but it didn't reach. Instead, I got up, pulled out the old leather-bound notebook I kept at the back of the drawer, and started to write. April 16th. I sat on a sofa I helped pay for, and somehow I became the problem. I didn't write often. The notebook was mostly scraps of grocery lists, notes from doctor visits, phone numbers I didn't trust to memory. But that night, I wrote 5 full pages. Not in anger, just in ache. About the lemon tart that no one touched. About the way Daniel looked at me, then looked away. About Clarissa's hand on Ruby's shoulder, as if guiding her away from something unsightly. I wrote until the words blurred, until my knuckles hurt from gripping the pen. Then I folded the pages in half and tucked them into the spine, as if hiding them would shrink the truth. Over the next few days, things continued. Quietly, precisely, painfully. Clarissa posted a video of the birthday setup online. In it, Eloise sat on the new sofa, holding a flute of champagne with the caption, "Celebrating elegance, 3 generations strong." I wasn't in the frame. The angle had cropped me out completely, though I'd been sitting 3 feet away refilling the fruit platter. Ruby noticed. "Where are you in the video, Grandma?" she asked, scrolling through her mother's page. "Behind the camera," I said, and left it at that. That week, I tried baking again. Apple muffins with a cinnamon sugar top, Ruby's favorite. I made them in the late evening when the house was quiet. The scent filled the space like a memory, warm and forgiving. Clarissa walked in around 9:30, heels in hand, her silk blouse tucked neatly into tailored pants. She paused, sniffed the air, and winced. "Oh, Margaret, did you bake tonight?" I nodded. Ruby asked she missed the muffins. Clarissa smiled, tight-lipped. "Of course. It's just that we're filming in the kitchen tomorrow and the backsplash tends to absorb oils. I'm trying to keep the marble matte." I turned back to the oven, shutting it gently. "Could we maybe avoid baking in the evenings?" she continued. "Morning scents are easier to clear, and the lighting is more forgiving." I nodded again, though I didn't remember agreeing in the first place. The next morning, I opened the pantry to find a printed note taped to the inside door. "Please avoid cooking after 8 p.m. Deep clean scheduled for Thursdays. Thanks for understanding." See, I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply stopped baking. Daniel, for his part, didn't mention any of it. He seemed more distant lately. Longer hours at work, shorter conversations at home. When I asked how his projects were going, he'd nod, say, busy, and retreat to his laptop. One night, I approached him while he was reviewing blueprints at the dining table. "Daniel," I began, "do you think I'm overstepping?" He looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "With the kitchen, with Ruby, with everything." He frowned. "Clarissa just likes things clean, Mom. You know how she is. You're not doing anything wrong. Just maybe give her space to manage the flow of the house." "The flow?" He exhaled. "The aesthetic. It matters to her. She's building a following now." I nodded, but it felt like a sentence. I went back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my hands. These are not aesthetic hands, I thought. They were scarred from ovens, rough from kneading dough, wrinkled from time. They didn't match the marble counters or the glass vases. That night, I wrote again, April 21st. I miss butter on the air and flour on my skin. I miss being asked for seconds. I miss feeling needed. The next morning, I caught Clarissa wiping the fridge handle after I touched it. She smiled politely, not unkindly. "It's just habit," she said, spritzing it again. "Cameras pick up fingerprints like you wouldn't believe." I began leaving fewer prints. I wore socks on the hardwood. I opened doors with sleeves. I spoke softer, moved slower, shrank smaller. Ruby noticed. "Why don't you sing when you cook anymore?" she asked one afternoon, drawing at the kitchen table. "I guess I forgot the words," I said, patting her hair. She frowned, then returned to her coloring book. On the page, she had drawn a house. Inside were 4 stick figures: Mom, Dad, Ruby, and Grandma. I was standing outside the house. When I asked her why, she shrugged. There wasn't room inside. It was nearly midnight when I heard voices down the hallway. At first, I thought the sound was the dishwasher humming or the pipes groaning in the walls. But then came a soft laugh, Clarissa's, and the low murmur of Daniel's voice. I stepped quietly out of my room, slippered feet muffled on the hallway rug, and paused near the slightly ajar door to their bedroom. "I'm just saying," Clarissa whispered, her voice a mixture of exasperation and amusement. "We've worked so hard to build this aesthetic, this energy, and now it's like she throws off the entire vibe." A pause. I heard Daniel shifting, the rustle of sheets. "She's his mother," he said, but there was no weight to it. Clarissa replied, "I know that, and I love that she loves Ruby. But look around, Dan. Does this house look like it was designed for lace doilies and banana bread? We can't keep tiptoeing around her." Another pause. Then came the line that hollowed something in me. "She's not a guest anymore. She's a permanent element. We need to do something. This place was supposed to reflect us, not history." I didn't wait to hear the rest. I returned to my room and closed the door gently, as if afraid the sound might confirm my place as intruder. The next morning, I said nothing. Clarissa handed me a kombucha and smiled. I smiled back. My fingers curled tight around the bottle's neck. That afternoon, I went looking for Ruby's soccer schedule. Clarissa had said it was in the family group chat. "You're still not on it?" she asked when I asked again. "Must be a tech glitch." I borrowed Daniel's tablet while he was in the shower. Not to spy, I told myself, just to find the schedule, just to be efficient. The app opened automatically. The chat was titled Household Sync. 6 members: Daniel, Clarissa, Eloise, Clarissa's sister, a nanny named Maddie, and Ruby through Clarissa's phone. No Margaret. Messages scrolled rapidly. Emojis, flight links, a screenshot of hotel bookings. I froze. Clarissa. Booked Cabo, 4 nights, oceanfront. No kids club, so Ruby can stay with Mom M while we reset. Eloise. Smart. She loves the dog anyway. Clarissa. Yes. Bonus. We come back to a clean house and sourdough. Daniel. Don't forget to leave the vet's number this time, LOL. Clarissa. Will do. I'll make a schedule so she doesn't mix the dog's diet again. Last time was tragic. I set the tablet down slowly. I had not been asked. I had not even been informed. I was not family in that moment. I was a function, a box to check, a convenient body to guard their property and feed the dog. I didn't tell Daniel I had seen the messages. I didn't ask Clarissa about Cabo. I simply returned the tablet and sat at the kitchen island, watching her slice cucumber into symmetrical ribbons for a detox water pitcher. "Big plans this week?" I asked, voice even. She smiled. "Just reorganizing the guest linens." Guest. I let that word settle. That night, I lay awake again. April 28th. They are building a life with me on the fringe, a life that uses me but does not see me. The next day, Ruby came into my room holding a printed coloring sheet. "Grandma, look," she said. "Mommy says we're going on a plane, but I don't get to go. She said I'm staying with you because you're calm." "Calm?" I asked. "She says you don't make messes and you don't complain and you always have snacks." I nodded, took the sheet from her hand. A picture of a beach. Palm trees, waves, a sun wearing sunglasses. "When do they leave?" I asked. She shrugged. "After Friday. Daddy said they need adult time. Is that like a nap?" I hugged her tighter than usual. She smelled like strawberries and washable marker. When Clarissa came in to get her, I asked, "Where are the dogs' feeding instructions? Just so I'm ready." Clarissa paused, just for a beat too long. "Oh, you saw the texts." I borrowed Daniel's tablet. She laughed. "Easy." "Of course. We were going to tell you tonight. We just wanted to finalize the itinerary." "And the dog's diet?" "I'll print it," she said. "You're the best, you know that. This family runs smoother because of you." I smiled politely, excused myself to the patio. The new sofa glistened through the living room window. That evening, I placed a sticky note on my mirror. I am not the help. I am not a relic. I am not invisible. But I was starting to see things clearly now. The thing about being invisible is that you hear more than people realize. You move through rooms like a whisper, and eventually, you start to see the dust others ignore. After the Cabo discovery, something inside me shifted. I moved slower, but my mind was sharper. The days that followed were quiet on the surface. Clarissa preparing sun hats and sandals, Daniel adjusting his out-of-office reply, Ruby dancing around in a cardboard airplane costume. I, meanwhile, began to look for the paper trail of my erasure. It started with a drawer in Daniel's old childhood desk, now tucked in the garage. Among dusty yearbooks and Lego manuals, I found the thin blue folder labeled Escrow, Dunleavy Home. My name was on the first page. Margaret Hollis, co-borrower. The second page listed a financial breakdown. 40% of the down payment traced back to a check drawn from my joint account with Tom. Life insurance funds paid to me after his death. I remembered that day so clearly now. Daniel sitting across the kitchen table, his eyes unsure. "We can get a better neighborhood, better schools for Ruby. It's an investment for the future," he said. I wrote the check without hesitation. He had promised to include me on the deed as security, though I never saw the final paperwork. "Don't worry, Mom, you'll be taken care of," he'd said. And technically, he hadn't lied. Page 5 of the folder confirmed it. Title owners: Daniel Hollis and Margaret Hollis. Clarissa's name wasn't listed once. I sat in the garage, surrounded by memories and moldy cardboard, holding a legal fact I had forgotten to protect. For the rest of the day, I said nothing. That evening, while Clarissa soaked in a milk bath upstairs and Daniel worked on his laptop, I logged into the county clerk's website. I searched the parcel ID on the escrow document and pulled up the public deed record. Still my name. Still legally mine. But socially, domestically, emotionally, I was a guest in my own investment. The next morning, while Clarissa packed sunblock, I asked, "Do you and Daniel plan to update the deed someday for estate purposes?" She blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The house deed." I was just curious, with Ruby and everything. She laughed too brightly. Oh, that's all in Daniel's world. He handles the boring stuff. I nodded, sipping my tea. I could taste the dishonesty in the air. Later, I dug deeper. In my nightstand, I found the original insurance deposit receipt, dated 12 years ago with Tom's initials. I took photos of everything: escrow files, deed pages, bank records. I stored them in a secure folder on my phone, marked recipes, just in case. That night, I wrote in my journal again. May the 2nd. The house where I am unwanted is half mine. The rooms that silence me were bought with a dead man's promise. She may own the couch, but I own the floor beneath it. The more I reviewed the documents, the clearer it became. Clarissa had always assumed the home was hers to curate, manage, and control. She never once asked about legal rights because she never imagined I had any. She treated me like someone lucky to be offered shelter. A quiet gratitude was expected of me. Compliance, cloaked in courtesy. But this wasn't charity. This was my investment, my signature, my name on the line. I remembered the early months after Tom died, when I cried into legal documents and trusted my son with financial decisions because I was too broken to read the fine print. He hadn't betrayed me, not deliberately. But Clarissa, she had built an empire of aesthetics on a foundation that wasn't hers. And worse, she had made sure I forgot that. She had transformed me from stakeholder to stowaway. The final push came the day before their trip. I heard her on the phone with her sister. The door to her office was slightly open. She was pacing, manicured fingers twirling a pen. "No, it's all fine," she said. "The house is locked down. She won't touch anything. She knows better." Pause. "No, I don't think she'd ever pull anything. She doesn't even ask questions anymore. It's like she's faded." I didn't feel faded. I felt focused. That night, I printed copies of everything: escrow, title, the insurance check. I sealed them in a manila envelope and slid it under the bottom drawer of my dresser, just beneath my old wedding album. Then I packed a small suitcase with 2 sets of clothes and Ruby's favorite book, The Velveteen Rabbit. I wasn't sure what I would do next, but I knew I wouldn't be the quiet fixture in Clarissa's curated life much longer. Clarissa always called herself a visual curator. It sounded vague enough to impress strangers, but polished enough to avoid questions. She had business cards printed in gold foil, with her name in lowercase script, and a tagline beneath: "Minimalism with soul." Her TikTok account started slow: home hacks, color palette advice, pantry rearrangements. Then came the house tours. One morning, while Clarissa was at a brand meeting and Daniel was out with Ruby at soccer practice, I received a notification from a woman at church. She had seen a video online and messaged, "Is this your house?" I clicked the link. Clarissa stood in our foyer, wearing a cream jumpsuit and no shoes, the camera gliding behind her like a silent shadow. "Welcome back to my sanctuary," she cooed. "Today, I'm showing you how to create a 3-zone living space that promotes calm, balance, and intentional breathing." She walked through the living room, my living room, gesturing toward the sofa I had once been asked not to sit on. "This piece is functional sculpture," she said. "Real Italian leather, gifted by my partner for my mother's birthday. I wanted something that reflected dignity, lineage, and clarity." I watched her glide through the house like it belonged to her soul. She passed the kitchen island. "Over here is where my culinary assistant organizes our snack prep and fresh bakes," she said with a laugh. "She's also my go-to dog sitter. Multi-talented, right?" Text appeared on the screen in neat font. Clarissa, design, Chakar living with Grace series, F'd my Mill, aka Home Angel's furry friend whisperer, Mill, Home Angel. I had no name, no voice, just a blurry reflection on the oven door. I scrolled through the comments. "Your house is stunning. Love how serene it feels. No clutter, no chaos. Your MIL sounds like a dream. Can I borrow her for a week? Such a lucky mom to live in your space." I closed the app. Clarissa hadn't told me she filmed that day. She hadn't asked to include me. She hadn't asked to turn my presence into brand equity. Later that afternoon, I saw a new layout pinned on the corkboard near the hallway. Guest suite redesign, Eloise move-in plan. The floor plan had been revised again. Eloise, Clarissa's mother, was being assigned the front sitting room. A chaise had already been delivered. A linen closet was cleared. A new brass nameplate read, Eloise's Corner, Quiet Luxury Zone. That night, Clarissa and Daniel sat me down at the dining table. "We wanted to run something by you," Clarissa began, placing her phone face down. "It's just an idea, but it could really bring balance." Daniel nodded, unreadable. "Mom's moving in for a while," Clarissa said. "Her lease ended early and she's transitioning from her gallery job. It makes sense logistically." I stayed silent. "She'll just be in the front room," she continued. "It's rarely used. And you still have your space, of course." I finally spoke. "So now there are 4 adults, 2 bathrooms, and 1 kitchen." Clarissa smiled. "But your room is more private, and she won't need much. She's minimalist like me." Daniel added quickly, "It's temporary." I stared at them. This couple who had built a world around harmony while quietly pushing me out of every frame. Then Clarissa said it, almost laughing as if she were sharing a charming observation. "Honestly, you and Eloise have such different energies. She's very monochrome. You're more textured." I looked at Daniel. He looked at the table. I stood. "When will she arrive?" "Next week," Clarissa said. "I'll help you reorganize so things don't get too crowded." I went to my room and locked the door. That night, I wrote again, May 5th. "Today I became a supporting character in my own home. She builds a brand on serenity, but leaves behind chaos. I am not part of her plan. I am an obstacle she manages through soft tones and airtight captions." The next morning, Clarissa approached me in the hallway. "I hope I didn't offend yesterday," she said. "You know I value you." I nodded but didn't respond. "I was thinking," she added, "you could be in more videos. Maybe we lean into your grandmotherly warmth. People respond really well to that, so I could be an aesthetic now. An accessory, a brand detail." I smiled. "I'll think about it." But I had already decided. If I was to be the ghost in this house, then I would haunt it on my terms. In the stillness of early morning, when even the refrigerator hum had quieted and the house seemed to float in its own curated perfection, I opened the filing cabinet beneath my bed. The manila envelope waited, untouched since the day I sealed it. Inside, copies of the deed, the original check from Tom's insurance, the escrow statements with both our names. Legal proof that I was not, as Clarissa had carefully constructed, just living here. I was an owner, a silent partner in a life she had tried to rebrand. I unfolded the documents and added one final page, a handwritten letter. I wrote it slowly, deliberately, with the same pen I used for grocery lists and Ruby's birthday cards. Not bitter, not cruel, but firm. "Clarissa, you have a beautiful eye for arrangement, but even the most elegant space cannot survive on design alone. A home is not curated, it is earned. You built your empire with my walls, my heat, my name on the deed. You never asked permission. You assumed I had none to give. This is me reclaiming my seat in the room by leaving it. Do not contact me until you are ready to speak honestly. Margaret." I folded the letter neatly, slipped it into the front page of the document set, and placed it in a gray envelope. On the outside, I wrote simply, "Please read together." Then I tiptoed into the living room. The Italian sofa sat under a shaft of moonlight, untouched and untouchable, as pristine as the day it arrived. I placed the envelope carefully on the middle cushion, centered between 2 decorative pillows. I stood there for a moment, absorbing the irony. The seat I had been denied was now my stage. Upstairs, silence. Daniel's gentle snore drifted faintly through the vent. Ruby, dreaming probably of castles or pancakes. Clarissa, nestled in her white linen cocoon, blissfully unaware that the foundation of her serene space was shifting under her. Back in my room, I changed into jeans and a soft flannel shirt. I zipped my suitcase slowly, careful not to rattle the wheels. One change of clothes, my journal. Ruby's drawing of our stick figure family, mine marked with a smile. I left the scarf Clarissa gave me on the doorknob, ivory silk, impractical and easily stained. As I reached the front door, I turned for one last glance. The house looked immaculate, not a chair out of place, not a scent of cinnamon or butter to betray warmth, just a showroom where love had been staged and silenced. I stepped out, locking the door behind me with the spare key Daniel never asked for back. The street was empty, the air cool. I walked 3 blocks to the bus stop and waited. At 4:45 a.m., a city bus pulled up, half empty and humming with tired lights. I boarded, found a seat by the window, and watched the house disappear behind slow turns and stop signs. As the sun broke over the horizon, I pulled out my phone. I emailed my lawyer. Subject, transfer request. Body. Please find enclosed scanned documents. I'd like to formally remove my name from the deed and gift my share to Daniel, with the condition that he acknowledge the original contribution publicly in the letter I've drafted. This is not punitive. It's closure. I pressed send and sat back. I didn't cry. There was no grief left, only clarity. That evening, I checked into a short-term rental, a quiet 1-bedroom with creaky floors and mismatched chairs. The kitchen was small, but mine. I unpacked flour, sugar, cinnamon. I baked muffins while the window fogged up with real heat, and the scent of browned butter filled the space. The next day, I bought Ruby a postcard with a dancing rabbit on the front. Sweetheart, Grandma's starting an adventure, one that smells like warm bread and sounds like old jazz. I'll write to you every week, and one day when you're ready, I'll teach you how to bake banana muffins that whisper secrets into the air. Love you more than sugar. Grandma. Then I placed the postcard on the counter and waited. The phone would ring eventually, but for now, I had space. Not curated, not borrowed. Mine. The morning sun poured through the living room windows just right, exactly as Clarissa had hoped. She'd been planning this shoot for weeks, a brand partnership with a Scandinavian furniture line, showcasing functional elegance in multi-generational living. The camera crew arrived promptly at 9 a.m., 2 young women with matching tripods and ring lights, their smiles sharp and professional. Clarissa greeted them in a soft gray jumpsuit, barefoot, hair in a loose chignon. Everything was perfect, except Margaret was missing. "Has anyone seen her?" Clarissa asked, voice light but tight around the edges. "She usually preps the tea cart," Daniel shrugged. "She was probably up early. Maybe she went for a walk." Clarissa glanced at the fridge. No post-it note, no fresh scones, no lavender tea, just stillness. She pushed down the ripple of irritation. "It's fine," she said, gesturing to the living room. "Let's start with the wide shots." The camera operator walked toward the new Italian sofa, centerpiece of the room, symbol of taste, wealth, and curated peace. Then she paused. Do you want this in the shot?" she asked. Clarissa turned. There, placed neatly on the center cushion, was a gray envelope. On top of it, a photograph, faded but clear, showed 3 people on a porch swing. Daniel, maybe 16, his arm wrapped around Margaret, who held a toddler Ruby in her lap. All 3 smiled, not for the camera, but for each other. The background, their old house, the one before granite countertops and matte finish appliances. Clarissa's breath hitched. She stepped forward, picked up the envelope. Her name was handwritten on the front in Margaret's looping script. The photograph fluttered to the floor as she opened it. Daniel watched from the kitchen. "What is that?" Clarissa read silently, her eyes scanning quickly, mouth tightening. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "She left." Daniel blinked. "What do you mean, left?" "She's gone," Clarissa said, voice sharper now. She moved out. One of the crew members looked up from her monitor. Do you want to pause filming? Clarissa waved her hand vaguely, eyes still on the letter. Just give us a second. Daniel took the envelope from her hands and read. As his eyes moved down the page, his face changed. Confusion, then realization, then a flush of something deeper. She sent the deed, he said, to a lawyer. Transferred her share of the house to me. It's official. Clarissa blinked. She what? She gave it up. Silence filled the room, thicker than any filter could erase. Clarissa's mother, Eloise, stepped into the room in her silk robe, eyeing the scene with mild annoyance. What's going on? Daniel didn't answer. He walked to the sofa, picked up the photo, stared at it for a long moment. Then he sat down slowly, right where Margaret had placed the letter. She left this for us to find, he said. Today of all days. Clarissa folded her arms. You think she planned it to sabotage the shoot? No, Daniel said. I think she planned it because she's done. The crew began packing up quietly. The lighting was still perfect, but the energy had curdled. Clarissa looked around the room, spotless, bright, filtered for public admiration, and for the first time, she saw what was missing. Not a rug, not a throw pillow, a presence. Margaret's presence had always been quiet, but now that it was gone, the silence felt hollow. Clarissa turned to Daniel. So what now? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he held the photograph in both hands, his thumb brushing over Ruby's baby face. She was in this house every day, he said quietly. She raised me, helped raise Ruby, paid for half this place, and we treated her like a backdrop. Clarissa said nothing. Upstairs, Ruby opened her bedroom door. Where's Grandma? She asked sleepily. No one answered. Daniel stood in the kitchen, the letter trembling slightly in his hands. He read it again, slower this time, as if a second reading might soften the blow. It didn't. She really left, he said under his breath, eyes darting over Margaret's looping script. She didn't even say goodbye. Clarissa hovered nearby, arms crossed, her carefully ironed blouse rumpled for the first time in weeks. Maybe she's just trying to make a point, she offered, tone brittle. She's dramatic sometimes. Daniel looked up sharply. Dramatic? Clarissa backpedaled. I just mean, maybe it's symbolic. She's always been sentimental. She transferred ownership of the house, Daniel snapped. That's not sentimental, that's final. He opened the folder again. Inside, neatly arranged, were copies of escrow documents, banking records, and the original life insurance check from their father. Everything was labeled, annotated, legal, undeniable. Clarissa reached for the folder. I didn't know she was still on the deed. Daniel pulled it back. That's the problem. You never asked. Clarissa bristled. Why would I? You always said it was our home. I said it was ours, Daniel said, but she helped buy it. She signed. She gave me that insurance money because she believed in me, because she thought I'd protect her place in this family. Clarissa's voice dropped. So now it's my fault she left? Daniel didn't respond. He looked around the room, the clean lines, the color-coordinated bookshelves, the untouched lemon tart still in the fridge. For years, he had thought of this house as a symbol of success. Now it felt like a hollow showroom. Ruby appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Is Grandma coming back? She asked. Clarissa knelt beside her. Grandma just needed a little trip, honey. She'll call soon. But Daniel shook his head. She won't call. Not until we deserve it. Clarissa stood. You're overreacting. She left a letter, not a ransom note. She left because she felt erased, Daniel said. Look around. Every part of this house screams Clarissa. Where is she in it? Where's her touch? Her comfort? You turned our home into your brand and pushed her out with a smile. Clarissa flushed. That's not fair. Daniel stepped closer, holding up the photo Margaret had left behind. This was our family. Look at it. You, me, Mom, Ruby. Not styled, not filtered, just real. Clarissa glanced at the image, then away. She wrote this, Daniel said, unfolding the final slip of paper from the envelope. He read aloud, "Don't call me Mom if I don't have a seat in the home I helped build." Silence followed. Even the air felt heavier. Clarissa tried again. "I didn't mean to push her out." "But you did," Daniel said, piece by piece, one scented candle, one curated caption at a time. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Daniel placed the photo and the papers back into the envelope and set it on the kitchen island. "We're canceling the shoot," he said, "and when Eloise arrives, she can stay at a hotel." Clarissa blinked. "Are you serious?" Daniel nodded. "Completely." He turned and walked toward the stairs, pausing halfway. "I'm going to call her lawyer. Maybe she'll talk to me through him, and maybe, if we're lucky, she'll let Ruby visit." Clarissa stayed rooted in place, her voice barely a whisper. "So, what happens now?" Daniel didn't turn around. "Now, we start over, with fewer throw pillows and more respect." The video didn't go viral immediately. At first, it was just a few comments. Curious, mildly critical. A user reposted it with a simple caption. "Is anyone else uncomfortable with how the Mael is described here?" Then someone else stitched it, quoting Clarissa's voiceover, "She's also my go-to dog sitter," followed by a pause, and then, "Wait, what?" By the end of the week, the clip had over 200,000 views. By the next, it passed 1 million. The comments turned brutal fast. This woman turned her mother-in-law into a prop. Imagine living in someone's house and erasing them from the narrative. She built a brand on stolen space, karma in neutral tones. A Reddit thread surfaced titled, "Interior Designer or Family Eraser." Screenshots of Margaret's letter, leaked somehow, circulated on Twitter. A quote from it became a trending sound. "Don't call me Mom if I don't have a seat in the home I helped build." Clarissa's comment sections flooded. Brands she had partnered with quietly removed her name from campaigns. One issued a statement. "We believe in authenticity and honoring generational bonds. We stand with mothers." At home, the silence was thunderous. Clarissa shut herself in the guest bathroom for hours. The ring lights and tripods disappeared from the living room. Even the sofa, once proudly flaunted, was now covered with a throw blanket, like a stain she couldn't scrub. Daniel watched it all unfold with a steady, haunted gaze. He didn't defend her publicly, not once. Instead, he wrote a message in the family group chat. The group chat, now updated to include Margaret once more. Daniel Hollis. "I owe everyone, but especially my mother, an apology for forgetting what home means, for allowing silence to replace respect. Daniel Hollis. I've asked Clarissa to leave for a while, not as punishment, but to give space for repair, if that's still possible." Clarissa saw the message. She didn't respond. 2 days later, she packed a weekender bag and left without a word. Eloise never moved in. The house was quiet again, not curated, just still. Daniel called Margaret's lawyer and asked for a meeting. Margaret agreed, but not right away. She wanted time, distance. Meanwhile, Ruby drew a new picture. This time, Margaret was inside the house. Clarissa was not. One night, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, alone, no laptop, no distractions, and opened his journal. He wrote just one sentence. "Love isn't something you style, it's something you show." The old house had sat quietly for years, wrapped in ivy and memory. It was the place where Daniel had taken his first steps, where Tom had grilled burgers on Sunday afternoons, where every holiday once smelled like cinnamon and sage. When Margaret stepped through the door again, keys trembling in her hand, it didn't feel like going backward. It felt like breathing. Daniel had been there the week before, scrubbing walls, patching drywall, replacing fixtures. "It's still yours, Mom," he'd said. "It always was." He didn't say much more than that, just handed her the key with a kind of reverence, the same way he used to hand her birthday cards as a boy, like it mattered. Inside, the wallpaper had been stripped back to soft neutrals. The kitchen still needed work, but the oven was warm, the pantry stocked, and the window above the sink opened without a groan now. Margaret unpacked slowly. She brought only what she needed: her journal, her baking pans, the quilt Tom loved. The rest she let go. Ruby arrived the first Friday after the move. She came barreling through the front gate, backpack slung over one shoulder, stuffed rabbit in hand. "Grandma!" she cried, hugging Margaret with all the force her tiny arms could muster. "Is this your real house now?" Margaret laughed. "It's home again." Ruby nodded solemnly. "You're my home grandma now, not the video house grandma. This one smells better." They spent the weekend baking lemon bars, playing board games, and falling asleep watching movies from DVDs instead of streaming services. Ruby said the crackling TV made it feel like magic. Each Sunday evening, Daniel would pick her up. Sometimes he'd stay for dinner. Sometimes he'd just sit in the driveway for a moment, too long before driving away. He was quieter these days, more thoughtful. He brought groceries without being asked, fixed the screen door on a whim, and always left with a hug. Clarissa stayed away. For 3 months, Margaret heard nothing but silence. The internet forgot her. TikTok moved on. The sofa was no longer trending. The house became what it was meant to be, just a house. Then, one afternoon in early fall, Margaret opened the door to find Clarissa on the porch. She wasn't wearing silk or beige, no curated outfit, no phone in hand, just jeans, a plain sweater, and eyes rimmed with fatigue. "Hi," Clarissa said, voice small. Margaret didn't move. "I'm not here to make a scene," Clarissa said, "or to ask for anything." Margaret waited. Clarissa took a breath. "I didn't realize what I was doing. Not really. I thought I was building something beautiful. But I was editing out the people who made it possible." She looked down. "I didn't just push you out of a room. I pushed you out of the story, and I'm sorry." The words were simple. No flourish, no hashtags. Just apology. Margaret stepped aside. "Come in," she said. They sat in the living room. No cameras, no lighting, just soft afternoon light filtering through worn curtains. Clarissa noticed the photo on the mantel, the same one she had ignored months ago. Margaret, Daniel, and baby Ruby on a swing. "I forgot about that day," she said. Margaret nodded. "You weren't there." Silence again, but this time it didn't sting. Clarissa stood after a few minutes. "I won't take up more time. I just wanted to say it out loud. You deserve that much." Margaret walked her to the door. "I'm not angry," she said, "but I don't miss who you were." Clarissa blinked, then nodded. "Neither do I." That night, Margaret sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sky shift from gold to lavender. Ruby had left a note on the fridge before heading home. "Don't ever move again. Your house smells like hugs." Margaret smiled. Home wasn't a location. It was permission to be fully present. And at last, she'd given that to herself. There's a quiet that comes after survival, not the kind that aches, but the kind that settles into your bones and tells you you're finally safe. Margaret sat at her kitchen table, journal open, teacup steaming beside her. The room was filled with the smell of warm butter and sugar, her signature cookies now browning in the oven. The old ticking clock above the sink clicked steadily, grounding her in a rhythm she had once forgotten. She flipped to the last page of her notebook, June the 2nd. "I once thought I needed space in a house. What I really needed was space in someone's heart. The deed was never about ownership. It was about being seen." She smiled, closed the book, and slid it back into the drawer. In the next room, Ruby was building a pillow fort with unmatched cushions and old quilts. She wore one of Margaret's aprons like a cape. "Grandma," she called, "can we make the vanilla kind next?" Margaret laughed. "Only if you promise not to eat the dough this time." Ruby popped her head out of the fort. "No promises." They were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Daniel stood there, holding a box wrapped in brown paper. "For you," he said. "Belated Mother's Day. I didn't know what to buy this year, so I made something." Inside the box, a hand-carved wooden sign painted with delicate flowers. In the center, the words, "This home was built by love, not by trend." Margaret traced the edge with her finger, swallowing the lump in her throat. Daniel cleared his throat. "Ruby said you should hang it above the oven." Margaret smiled. "She's right." He hesitated before adding, "She's also been asking why we never visit your place more often. I told her we're fixing that." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Daniel looked up. "I never said it, but I should have." Margaret waited. "I'm sorry, Mom." The words didn't erase the past, but they softened it. Later that evening, Ruby insisted on story time in the comfy spot. That comfy spot was Margaret's old sofa, the same one Clarissa had once said didn't match the aesthetic. It now sat in Margaret's sunroom, covered in a crocheted blanket and flanked by overgrown potted plants. Ruby curled up beside her, head on Margaret's shoulder, a cookie in each hand. Margaret leaned back, eyes half closed, letting the weight of the child anchor her in the present. Somewhere in the kitchen, the oven beeped gently. The camera, if there had been one, would have captured it perfectly. The soft golden light, the smell of cookies, a grandmother and grandchild nestled in an embrace that needed no caption. In that moment, Margaret whispered, maybe to herself, maybe to the world, "It was never about the sofa or the house. All I ever needed was a place in your heart." She didn't post that anywhere, didn't need to, but if she had, maybe she would have written this. To every mother watching this, silently wondering if her presence still matters, you do. Even when your voice is edited out, even when your hands are used, but your heart ignored. You are the foundation, quiet, unshakable, and often unseen. But one day they will hear your absence louder than your presence ever rang. And when they do, may they come back, not for guilt, but for grace. Margaret didn't need a video to go viral. She had Ruby, she had her name, and finally, she had peace.